Hey guys, I bought a lens for more money than I have ever spent on anything else because I had been looking at a bunch of people's work, a bunch of people's photos, and those photos all had this magic to them, and I thought, this is what my photography is missing. I need this magic. So after like a long time, I finally spent 2 weddings worth of money on just one lens. Because I knew that I was missing this something that was making everyone else so much better. And I literally, every time I saw a picture on Instagram that was like, wow, this is really good, I would message them and say, hey, which lens did you use? Hey, which lens did you use? I did this for like 6 months until I realized, you know what? I need this lens because if I do not have this lens, my photography is just not going to be amazing like this. It's not going to have this magical, like, draw you in feel like these other people have. So I finally did it. And I bought this lens and my photography like kind of look the same. Like, okay, I'm just in this learning curve, you know? Like, I'm gonna get this. But try and try and try. And I finally realized the reason I wasn't getting this magical thing that everyone else was getting was not because of the lens that I had. Although different lenses can help you do different things. It was because these photographers were using whichever lens and creating amazing compositions. So, dove a little deeper on this. And I would say that I'm still actually learning this. Because any situation you're in, any new situation, you're going to have to come up with, okay, how do I make all these different elements work together so it's not just a picture of a person or something, but so that it is a piece of art. So what do we need to know to make amazing composition? Well, you don't need an expensive lens. That's the number one thing. The crazy thing is with composition, you do not have to have quality of gear in order to make this happen. It's all about your angles, all about how you position, all about how you see lines and lead lines, and using negative space and the rule of thirds. Let's just start in this week with a few rules. The first rule is going to be every single picture you have, you need to have some negative space. Now, right here, you can see I have some negative space here. But also there is a little bit of stuff in there. I had a wedding 2 weeks ago, and the reception was going to be inside under fluorescent lights, and I thought, you know what, this is going to be terrible. Like, just really bad lighting situation, and I was not excited. But the decorators, I've never had a wedding like this. All the decorations, they were all in towers. There would be this tower, the cake tower, there'd be the gift tower, there'd be bouquets or whatever that kind of came up in these pillars, and I was able to fill in this negative space here of every single photo at the reception, which reception pictures oftentimes aren't like, whoa, that's just a piece of art. No, it's like tables and people sitting at tables, like nothing super cool. But because I had these towers of things, I was able to go right behind them, and I would fill in this negative space with something creamy. So the bouquet, the cake, I would basically block out the rest of the tables and all of those things because I had something to just blur out. It'd be a blurred out something, and that was my negative space. So that people's eyes, when they looked at these pictures, their brains got a break, a visual break. Now, that leads us to our other thing. So if you are creating an image with a piece of negative space, you probably are going to be following this other rule, So the rule of thirds, you probably have heard it before. I remember being in my first college class, photography class, and this was a big thing. Like, make sure you take your photos and put your people on the side or put their heads up in the upper third. So you can take your picture and think of it as in 3 slices. 3 slices across and 3 slices up and down. So if you're creating an image with a bunch of negative space to give the people's brain like, a little bit of a break, then you're going to come in on one of the thirds. So in this screen, I've got 1, 2, 3. You're going to come in with a photo of your image. You're going to come in with your subject in this side. Now, you can be dead center. This is another rule you can follow, the rule of symmetry. So if you had 2 trees coming in like this, and then you had your subject right here, or if you had a subject right here, and the lead lines from the road, that would work perfectly. We're using the rule of symmetry. So rule of thirds with negative space, or rule of symmetry where you're kind of smack in the middle, and then you have kind of the same thing happening on both sides. One thought, when you're doing the rule of thirds, you got to think about one other thing. So last week I had a wedding, and I was thrown off because I didn't have any lead lines. So I didn't have any roads. I didn't have any like pillars of a church, and I didn't have any like walkways. So there was like no lines, nothing like that. There was a big lawn and there was some trees. So for lighting purposes, I tried to go with the trees. So I put my subject there, and trees here and there. So it wasn't like I had one tree so if I had one tree, I would probably put my tree right here and then my subject right here, and then the lead line of the branches would come over. And now there's just trees here and there and everywhere. So sometimes when I was taking the picture, I would have one tree, let's say one tree right here, bride and groom, some negative space. The one mistake you should never make. I was editing to midnight last night, and I was like, what was I thinking? It would have been beautiful. Tree, couple, negative space. Except that the tree is tall, so then you should have the man who is tallest, and then the woman, and then the negative space. So it's kind of like this swooping down. I think the reason we like mountains is because they have these lines that our eyes can follow. That's how it should have been. Tree, man, woman, negative space. So that your eyes can follow this line. For whatever reason, I was not thinking. I knew in the moment that I was struggling. I wasn't being creative. I was just trying to get through some poses because I was feeling overwhelmed. Okay. What I did, tree, woman, man, negative space. And when you stick a tall man, which he wasn't that much taller than her, but when you stick a man's back and then have this little dip and then it's like a wall. It visually breaks the whole thing. So, what can you learn from this? One, if you're taking a picture of a couple, short, tall, tallest thing here. But in general, this rule can be applied. You want your people to go up and down, and you want usually you want your line, like your height of people, to come up towards the edge. So think of your photography, think about mountains, think about lines, and you don't want to end your mountain right here with you don't want it to be like a bike jump where it comes whoop, and then nothing here, and then unless you have a intense like tree branches or something coming in for your negative space. Okay, that's a lot. Negative space, rule of thirds. So be in one of the thirds. Keep your subject up in that third or down in this third. unless you're like smack dab in the middle when you're using the rule of symmetry. Other than that, you want to try and use that rule of thirds. One trick that you can do if you're in a situation where there really isn't any lines, like you don't have a fence or a driveway or, you know, some kind of line to make things interesting, what could you do? I have been shooting in a place, actually I had like 5 shoots there last week and 2 this week. In a place where there's not a whole lot except like rocks that go up and down. Okay. Also, sometimes the lighting isn't perfect. What would you do in that situation? If you think back to my reception situation where they had those towers, the same thing has been working for me, except there's all these little river bushes. So I've been using a lot of the rule of symmetry. There's these little soft bushes and they can come all the way up to my subject, and then I'm shooting through them and it creates this negative space that's just soft and creamy on the edges because I'm shooting through it and then my subject is way out there. Also, sometimes I use a bigger bush on one side. So the big bush is here and maybe it's leaning over and then my subject's tall, shorter, like that. And then I'll have another creamy but smaller bush on this side so that I'm like drawing the eyes up through this curve. So that is what we're thinking. How are our curves coming? Are our curves leading your eyes to someplace? Now, you guys have an advantage if, I don't know how tall you are, but if you're shorter, you have a different view of the world than adults. Oftentimes, photographers have to learn, I'm up here and now I need to pull down here so that I can see things a little bit different, and because it's a lot more pleasing and the composition is so much better. But you guys are already down there, so potentially, maybe you're way taller. So just play with that. What does it look like if you get down? And tonight I had a shoot where we were at a place, it's called Side Street in Kashmir. It's super cute and there's lots of railings. So I was able to use the railings to draw, to bring, so the railings here, and then it kind of brings your eyes towards the subject. So that's the whole idea with composition. Where are your eyes going? When do they need a break? If you take a bunch of pictures and you want to put them all together in an album, we want, this is taking it a step further. This is now advanced. Okay, so when I do my album, the page sometimes starts with an image that falls down this way, and then the next image will have some negative space, and my pages, the subjects, tall, shorter, up, down. The heads are I never pair images together where it's like, oh, this person and this person and this person and this person all the same height, because you will look at those pictures but your eyes aren't traveling naturally and just being drawn through this process. So if you ever do a spread of pictures, you want to bring them through this rolling thing. So also, if you had a family group, a lot of people, sometimes you want to do that mountain thing. Sometimes your mountain is going to kind of be more like this, and sometimes you will be more centered and have the family the taller, and then this, kind of simple concept. But it's all going back to composition and these rules of like how our brains interpret and how our eyes flow into things and how we're drawn into things. This is one of the very challenging things about taking pictures of a family with a bunch of grown children and they're all the same height. You have to figure out, how can I arrange them so that it's not just a straight line across? Not that that would be a bad photo, but that's not going to be like, wow, that's an amazing photo. So if you want to arrange a family, you're going to add in one of these mountain in some way. But if you want to take it a step further, if you have mountains or something in the background, you can actually correlate your family's mountain with the flow. And that is where it gets super cool, where you take composition of land and then composition of your people and you mesh it together, and then your photography is, wow, it's just way beyond like just normal photography. So this is your homework for this week. See how many different ways you can see the world. Look for lead lines, see if you have any fences, any roads, any mountains, anything that might bring in lines. You can even use lines within your house. I have lines here, another line leading that way. Yeah, so just take a minute when you're taking photos, get down low, get up high, and see if you can make these lines work for you. Another thing to work with when you're making a line work for you is, do I need my subject at the end, or do I need to pull my subject forward and have them at the front of the line and the line falling off behind them? Or is the line in front and leading you into them? There's no right or wrong answer, but if you do one with the subject in front and then one with the subject behind the line, you're going to be able to be like, yeah, this one is actually way better than the other one. But you don't necessarily know that until you try. Have fun with that this week. Trying out lead lines, negative space, the rule of thirds, and that's it. Have fun. Bye.